Hello, everyone. This is Jacqueline Diaz from SweetSavageFlame.com, and this is my podcast, Sweet Savage Flame, where I talk about romance novels. Now, romance novels are really huge right now. There's the Outlander program on Stars, and of course, the Bridgerton show on Netflix, which were based on best selling romance novels. Romance novels are a multi million, if not a $1 billion industry. They sell and they sell a lot of books. There's a lot of people who read them, but for some reason, they get the kind of short shrift in the industry. They don't get as much respect as they deserve. And that's something that I think is a real shame because romance is a huge part of our lives. It's what drives most of us. If we go back to the history of the romance novel, we can go back to Jane Austen or Charlotte Bronte, but I really want to talk about the revolution that happened during the 1970s. In the 1970s, a lot of things were happening. There was the feminist movement going on, and things were becoming a little bit more sexual. Women were owning their sexuality, their identity, and books were being written that were more sexually explicit in the past. And these were novels that were termed bodice rippers. Now, bodice rippers can be used as a pejorative term by those not too familiar with the genre or readers or authors of romance who try to distance themselves from older problematic books. I am here to defend the bodice ripper, the true bodice ripper, not just historical romance, the genre, because bodice ripper is what heralded in the new age of romance, creating something that had never been seen before. Up until Avon released The Flame and the Flower in 1972, romances were limited to books like Barbara Cartland's vast stable of sweet, saccharine stories, Georgette Heyer's light romances, mild Mills and Boons or Harlequins, medical romances, gothics, comics, or historical fiction. If a female reader wanted a little bit more raciness, there was the grandmother of the bodice ripper, which was Edith Hull's The Chic and its sequels. There were lurid pulp fiction books released by prolific paperback distributors, and eventually there were authors like Harold Robbins, Jacqueline Suzanne, and Jackie Collins who came on the scene in the 60s. But their books were definitely not marketed as romance because a lot of the times when women became sexually active, they would pay for it, either by being abandoned by their men or dying or being left alone. It pretty much, if a woman was sexually active, she was not a good woman. So the bodice ripper came along and allowed a woman to be sexual without the baggage. Now, today, back then, mainstream romance and raciness just didn't mix. They always ended in sweet kisses or fade to black love scenes. And then in 1972 came what is called the bodice ripper, and at the time it was vaunted as an expression of women's liberation. Thanks to Kathleen Woodiwiss, Rosemary Rogers, and the women and the men who followed in their footsteps, romances took on a larger scope as heroines went through the fires of hell and back to get her love. And yes, the books could be violent, including issues like forced subduction or even rape. Sometimes the heroine had multiple lovers. In other stories, the hero would be her one and only lover. Personally, I'm all about the bodice ripper. As far as I'm concerned, too many romance novels just don't do it for me anymore. I don't really have much interest in reading about dukes or marquesses or the rest of the gentry who inhabit most of contemporary historical romance, with scoundrels who really aren't scoundrels at all, and book titles that allude to unnecessary guides to seduction, since half the heroines have no sense of historical propriety and willingly take on heroes as lovers, and then they refuse to get married because they're not loved in return. It's completely ahistorical. So interested in becoming a critique of manners of society, a la Jane Austen, with a little bit more explicit sex, that these books forget to be fun first and foremost. They're so stuck on being feminist or being inclusive or being following a certain dogma. I'm a fan of the old school, schlocky, purple prose written historical romance novels, the vintage Harlequin presents, and I'm proud of it. Like good B movies, they never pretended to be more than what they were. Maligned as chauvinist junk, and admittedly, some were, but so what? They were historically accurate, adventurous epics that had plots that, without sex, would make Zane Grey or even Sir Walter Scott proud. Thanks to romance authors like Roberta Jellis or Deanna James, and many, many others, I know more about medieval politics, the American Old West, nautical terms, archaic social mores, wars like Napoleonic, American and English civil wars, the Crimean War, the American and French revolutions than I ever learned in school. Of course, I got my information from other sources besides romance novels, but older romances were often historically accurate. Now, romance novels claim to be historically accurate, but they have characters that just act completely ahistorical. From what I've seen on romance forums and blogs, is that there's a substantial number of readers that have a yearning for a return to the best of retro. Not necessarily plots where the heroine is raped by every man, or the heroine has to be a virgin, pure from the beginning, while the hero gets to sleep around, but there's a desire for more variety, for different kinds of characters, for heroes who have more depth than just being the required alpha rake or the sensitive beta male, or the heroine they want a heroine who grows from the first page to the last. They want a variety of locations and historical settings besides England during the Georgian, Regency, and Victorian times. They want fewer wallpaper historicals, more adherence to cultural norms and inserting modern mindsets, and they want more than just sex to a love story. Good writing doesn't hurt, too. Although readers seem very forgiving in that regard if you give them an engaging story. The story is paramount. At least for me it is anyway. That's one of the reasons why I love older romances so much. They knew how to keep a reader turning the pages to the very end. Well, that's about all what I have to say for today. I know this is a kind of controversial topic. A lot of people really get upset when you critique their favorite books. I'm here defending bodice strippers. So what do you think about this topic? Are old school historicals and bodice strippers relics of a bygone era? They're interesting to look at maybe as one would a museum artifact, but not worth anything to today's readers. Are they offensive and should be completely ignored? Do you wish more romances would be like they were in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s? Or are you happy with the way the historical romance genre is today? Well, that's something to think about. And next time we'll talk about it. So, hope you guys have a great day. And let's talk about romance. Bye.